Okay, welcome back to the channel. I just had to wait until the sun went down so that we could do this without any extra glare or reflections. So we've got the PSP is connected to the car TV. So I'm sitting in the car now with the PSP plugged in. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to go through and show you guys what's actually on my PSP. So I've got a couple of plugins installed, which I won't really get into right now, but basically I've got the plugin for categories, which I've mentioned in a previous video, and this has just allowed me to put folders basically for all of my games. So I thought maybe just to give you guys a good rundown, we're going to start from the top and just work our way through and show you guys what's actually on my PSP. This is my daily PSP. So we're going to start from the top. So this is the PS1 demo discs. Recently I did a video where I was working on the Pizza Hut exclusive demo discs, and I've converted those into PSP format for people to check out. Just a really cool piece of history, and there's some interesting demos on there and some Pizza Hut branding as well, which is sort of something that you wouldn't really see these days. Into the action category. So Bounty Hounds is one that I've covered in a previous top 10 video for Hidden Gems. It's quite a cool action RPG that's not very well known, and it's got a lot of customization with the different character weapons and equipment and that kind of thing, and there is a limited multiplayer as well. Black Rock Shooter, again a similar sort of action RPG focusing on the protagonist going through various levels and having like quite balletic combat. It's quite fast paced, quite cool action adventure. I'll just turn the volume down on this a little bit, because it's going to get really loud otherwise. Okay, so God of War, Chains of Olympus, and Ghost of Sparta as well. So both of those God of War titles, really fantastic, super high production quality, really feels like a PS2 game on the go. And in a similar sort of train of thought as Dante's Inferno, which is, I guess, a more, I don't want to say grounded, but a slightly more, just a different take really on the God of War formula, focusing on, sort of the Catholic Crusades, or the Christian Crusades, just something a little bit different there. Prince of Persia, Rival Swords, a really faithful port, really good game. Now the Warriors is quite a handful in terms of the controls, but I think it's really impressive what they've managed to cram in. It's pretty much the full game, just de-resed. It's been brought down to PSP resolution, but otherwise it's really decent game. Force Unleashed, I've covered this in another previous video as well. This game is really fantastic on the PSP, just really high action, and it's actually based on a port of the Wii version, which uses a different engine to the home console version. No Gravity is kind of like a really simplistic action space sim. It's quite fun combat. It can get a little bit repetitive, but just for the lack of a better title on the PSP, this is kind of the best you're going to get in terms of space sim. Marvel Ultimate Alliance, just really, really fun, classic Marvel, and this is kind of before, the MCU really took off. This is sort of in its early days, but yeah, it's really cool. Each character's got different move sets and everything, and then you've also got here Ultimate Alliance 1, so you've got both of them. I actually think the first game is better, but you've got both versions there. Alright, so moving on to the adventure section. Dexter, I'd say this is definitely in the top 5 or the top 10 PSP games of all time. Really, really polished, just fantastic game. I'm really disappointed they didn't make a sequel. I'm hoping that they're going to bring the Jak and Daxter series back. but this really is just a fantastic game on the PSP. And even if you play it on modern hardware with upscalers and emulators and everything, you know, it's a really good game in its own right. On a similar sort of path with Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, it's pretty much a full Ratchet and Clank game on the go. Really entertaining combat, really good use of gadgets, and just feels like a standard Ratchet and Clank full release title. Ape Escape P, in my opinion, is the definitive way to play the original Ape Escape, with everything being upscaled and remastered. Little Big Planet for the PSP, slightly limited compared to the home console version, but still pretty decent. And if I can find it, there is an archive somewhere of a lot of user levels. So when this game came out, obviously you could go online and you could download other people's levels and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, because the servers are offline, that content is no longer accessible, but there is a way to load that onto your memory card, and you can load from the local memory. But there is an archive of those levels that you need to install, which was produced by some fans and kept, I think it might be on the Internet Archive, but I'll see if I can find it, and if I do, then I'll definitely upload a link for that. Loco Roco, just a really unique, really fun platformer where you tilt the level instead of playing with the characters directly. You sort of interact with them in a way by tilting the level and trying to get through different puzzles, and there's really cute characters, and the music is interactive too, so when you split your characters into lots of little Loco Roco, each of those individual guys will sing a different part of the harmony. So, you know, there's some really cool layers to the game. Just really fun art style, and you know, it's one of the best titles on the platform. Death Jr., I've covered this previously. This was a really early release on the PSP back in 2005, and it was a really good tech demo of what the console was capable of, and it impressed a lot of people when it came out, but it sort of flew under the radar after that. Deadhead Fred is a surprisingly intelligent game. It's got some pretty goofy mechanics, but underneath it all is like a really interesting storyline, really cool character building and sort of world building, really interesting platforming and puzzles, and just something really quirky and different. It sort of reminds me of like similar to Psychonauts in that sense. Like, it's just a little bit cleverer than you'd think it would be. Tomb Raider Legend, just a classic Lara Croft, and this one is designed specifically for the PSP, so it makes really good use of the limited controls. It seems to be, I'd say, probably the better of the game offerings of the Tomb Raider series for the PSP. And then you've got Star Wars, Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy. This is a really faithful version of the full game. It's got local co-op. You can do pretty much everything you could in a normal Lego game. It's just what you'd expect. Hours and hours of entertainment, lots of unlockables, just a really decent game. Very well polished. Now we're going to arcade. I don't play a lot of arcade games, so this is a very loose category. So you've got Hot Pixel, which is one of my favorite minigame style. It's very similar to WarioWare, but it's like Atari's version of WarioWare. And the aesthetic and the design of this game really sort of informed my personal sense of style, I guess, growing up. Like, I thought this was what it was to be cool, so I imitated a lot of the stuff I saw in Hot Pixel, and like sort of the underground anti-culture, this kind of thing that came through really resonated with me, so it's always been a favorite of mine for that reason. Prinny is a very difficult platformer, and I've never really gotten past the first few levels, but I do enjoy it. I think it's a fun art style, and I think of all the Nippon Ichi games, this is probably one of my favorites. Beautiful Joe is one that is quite, I guess, was quite a surprise for me. I always saw the characters and didn't really understand the show or the, you know, didn't really understand these characters in these games. But a couple of years ago I decided to give it a try, and it actually turned out to be really fun, so I'd highly recommend this one. Metal Slug is just an anthology of the different versions of Metal Slug that came out to date from when this was released. I mean, kind of goes without saying. Metal Slug is very well known. It's really fun, fast-paced, arcade-style shooting. Every Extend Extra is kind of like a weird modern version of Snake with like rhythm sections, and it's also kind of like Space Invaders as well. It's just its own kind of thing. I don't really know how to describe it. It's like a rhythm action puzzle game. Really fun, really cool. Quite gets quite stressful sometimes, especially in the higher difficulties. Space Invaders Extreme, probably the second best version of Space Invaders that they've ever made. I'd say probably the first one would be Infinity Gene, which was only available on some versions of iOS and a couple of other platforms. But in terms of for the PSP, this is how you want to be playing Space Invaders. Super cool music, really cool backgrounds, interactive levels. They've modernized it with different power-ups and equipment. It's also a pretty lightweight game, like it doesn't take up a lot of storage space. So I'd say any PSP needs to have this on the memory stick. And Tekken Dark Resurrection. This is, I think, my favorite version of Tekken that's available on the PSP. There's a few Tekken releases, but this one is my personal favorite, just for the lineup of the roster is, the way the moveset's done. The Tekken DR is kind of my favorite one of the series. Now we go into puzzle. So I've mentioned this in some of my hidden gem videos. I'm surprised Tokobot didn't do better commercially when it came out. Super underrated. This game is really fun. Basically, you control these little robots and you use them in different configurations to attack enemies and solve puzzles and go through a world. It's kind of like Ape Escape if the apes were your companions instead of that you were trying to catch them. Just really fun blend of wacky platforming and action. Katamari, of course, rolling around a sticky ball. The controls are pretty hopeless on the PSP, but once you get into it, it's not too bad. This is one I've covered, which is kind of hard to explain, but it's basically a dungeon sim where you play as the bad guys. You have to create a dungeon for the hero to go through, and you win the level by defeating the hero, but it's all passive. So basically you dig the holes, and then all the NPCs will start to form little defenses and that kind of thing, and you can upgrade them by farming resources and things. And then once the heroes enter your dungeon, you have very limited interaction at that point. You can kind of dig a new pathway if you want to try and mislead them, but otherwise you're relying on your little army to go in and fight the heroes. So it's quite fun, quite interactive, and just a really different spin on that kind of RPG twist. Online Chess Kingdoms, I wish this game was better, and I do have it on here because it's just a really fun way to play chess. It does have pretty bad lag, and it's got a dog shit campaign that doesn't really make sense, but it's basically just like wizard chess. So each faction, I guess, has got like a different set of chess pieces, and you just play chess. So it's just chess with a fresh coat of paint, but so, unfortunately it's not super well optimized. I'm not sure whether having the UMD version of this game would be any better, but as far as I know, not many people really play this game anymore. Go Sudoku is my personal favorite of the Sudoku games on the PSP. It's really fun and polished, it's got cool music, it's quite interactive, and it's very satisfying when you clear a row or a square or finish a puzzle. It does have hints and different ways you can set up the difficulties. So if you're really rubbish at playing Sudoku, you can start on the easy difficulties and work your way up, or you can just go straight into hardcore if that's your thing. So Exit is a really interesting puzzle, sort of action puzzle game where you have to rescue people from buildings and escape from firing buildings. You play as this guy, like I think his name's Mr. Exit or something. This is Exit 2, which has a few more quality of life features and a few more extra ways in which you can interact with the environment. It's got really fun cel-shaded graphics, and just overall it's just a really interesting action puzzle game, which really makes you feel like a hero, and it's done in sort of like a film noir aesthetic. Echochrome is all about twisting perspectives. So when you move the joystick, you pivot the environment around, and it's sort of like one of those impossible triangles, or like the like an Escher painting or those stairs that are infinitely repeating, you can manipulate the environment by doing tricks of perspective in order to get your little guy to go through the level in the way that you see fit. Like you can obscure a gap in the pathway and then they'll just walk through like there wasn't a gap. You can line two things up that are actually on different planes or different levels of height, and then you can connect them that way. So it's quite fun, you know, twisting perspectives. And there is also a world builder in there as well, so you can make your own levels. Okay, on to racing games. I'll try and speed this up. Gran Turismo, the most complete, most accurate, I guess, simulator on the platform for domestic cars. I think if you're specifically looking at touring cars, then you would probably want Toka Race Driver. I think it's called Toka Race Driver 3 or something. But I like driving passenger cars, you know, cars that I am familiar with, so Gran Turismo takes the cake. And there's a good amount of rally cars and Formula Ones and stuff like that in there as well. Need for Speed Most Wanted is my favorite arcade racer on the platform. Just a really, really clean, stripped down version of 510 that works really well on the handheld. You've still got the wanted list. You can sort of rise up through doing different challenges. There's extra challenges you can do for bonus parts and custom decals. There's just a lot of customization with the vehicles. The online play for this was insane when it came out, but everyone ended up just using the M3 GTR. That was kind of the meta towards the end, M3 GTR 2. But, you know, for a while that was a really, really fun game to play online. But, of course, EA has pulled the servers a very long time ago. Now, Wipeout, I personally think Wipeout Pure is the better game. But Pulse is a little bit more frenetic, a little bit more flashy. There's a few more particle effects and so on. But I think in terms of an actual polished game, Wipeout Pure really takes the cake for me. And there's also some really fun, interesting DLCs, which I've covered in a previous video. There was a shit ton of DLC that came out for this game. So, like, depending on what region you were in, you got different DLCs. There was some that was exclusive to the UK, to Europe, to the Americas, to Japan and Australasia. Everyone kind of got a different bag of DLC for these games. And just really cool levels, really good ships, just generally a really good Wipeout game. I feel like Wipeout Pulse tried a little bit harder to be a bit more polished, but there was some performance issues because it was really pushing the system to its limits, and in some ways the flashiness kind of got in the way of the gameplay. Fired Up is the best vehicle combat game, and I personally think it's better than Twisted Metal. Fired Up has got a really interesting campaign which focuses on, you know, this sort of wartime scenario where you're gun runners and you're smugglers and you're rebels and you're trying to fight against this totalitarian government takeover. So there's a sort of like fictional universe that it's set in, which helps to build the lore of the story. And then it's also got like really killer multiplayer. The multiplayer games on here are super fun. It's got game sharing, it's got DLC, so there's a lot of stuff you can do with Fired Up. It's probably, quite surprisingly, it's one of the games I spend the most time on, especially when I'm playing with mates. For action, I guess in terms of like really off-road, crazy Mad Max style, I would highly recommend MotorStorm Arctic Edge. It's an exclusive game that was developed just for the PSP in the MotorStorm universe, and if you've played any of the PlayStation 3 versions of MotorStorm, you'd understand it's exactly the same. So you've got heavy reliance on boost, you've got a lot of carnage on the racetrack where, you know, the vehicles are interacting with each other, all the parts are disintegrating off, the environments are destructible, there's multiple pathways you can take on the races. It's really just like a no rules racing game, so it's quite fun. You can choose different types of vehicles, different classes, and then there's some limited customization options as well. Now, Sega Rally is a fairly decent rally game, although by modern standards it does feel a bit slow. It's very much in the simulator category, but it is an arcade game that was kind of repolished and repackaged, but it is pretty good, and I'd say for lack of a Colin McRae or a WRC, this is kind of your best bet. It's a pretty fun game to get into. Now, Mark Modified Air Combat Heroes, I did cover this in my Hidden Gems. This is quite a fun, really arcade style flight game. When I first bought this in 2007, I actually thought it was like kind of like Ace Combat, and was a bit disappointed at first because it's kind of like it's more like a rail shooter with racing and then dogfights as well. But when you get into it and understand what the game's going for, it's actually pretty fun, and I'd say it's probably one of Sierra's better original games. Pursuit Force is like a really fun mix of combat and racing. You play as like a police squad where you've got vehicle combat and you're hopping between the vehicles and, you know, fighting each other on the roads, and it's really hard to explain. You have to give it a go. I mean, back in the day, this was groundbreaking. This was just like, oh my god, I can't believe you can jump between the cars and you can fight people on the road and then you can take over their vehicles and all this kind of stuff. So a lot of interesting, cool mechanics and just like a really over-the-top storyline. There's two games I think in the Pursuit Force series, and there may well be another spin-off, but this is the one that I've been playing the most. Ridge Racer 2, super cool vibes if you really like that kind of, I guess, Euro style, Euro beat, fusion, jungle music with DJ announcers over the top, really cool cars, over the top drifting, nitrous heavy racing, very classy, very clean, really cool aesthetics, just like cool vibes all around, really high horsepower racing. Then this is kind of the game for you. If you're into street tuning, Midnight Club 3 is probably the most comprehensive. It's like GTA without any of the GTA bits. So basically, you know, you've got full customization of the cars, you go around doing dangerous missions, there's an interesting storyline, there's an open world. You can really customize the cars just to a ridiculous level, and it's right in that sweet spot of like sex spec culture. So the customizations you can do by today's standards are pretty hideous, but it's a great time capsule of that era in automotive history, and in my opinion is like, you know, kind of the peak of that Fast and Furious over the top style. Now you've got Dirt 2 here, which is, you know, just a really grounded rally game. It does suffer a little bit from some performance issues. You know, a little bit of lag here and there. The controls can be a little bit boaty, but it's trying to go for a slightly more realistic edge than Sega Rally. A little bit less accessible, but it is good if you stick with it. Full Auto 2 Battle Lines was super underrated and was criticized for being too one-dimensional when it came out, but I actually think that's one of its strengths. It's just a no-holds-barred sort of vehicle shooter combat racing game. You drive around in cars with guns on top, you pick up, you know, weapons as you go around, and you fight each other as you try and complete the tracks. It is something that takes a little bit of getting used to because the cars don't really drive like cars. They're quite, I guess they turn sharper than they should, so you have to kind of get used to that, being able to turn on a dime. Sometimes you'll overcorrect on a corner until you get used to the arcade style of how they move around. And otherwise it's pretty fun. I wouldn't say it's a game that you could play, you know, for long periods of time, but for a pick up and play, just a bit of fun, it's quite a cool game. Now Outrun Coast to Coast is very much a full-on Japanese style arcade game with really over-the-top graphics and just fun gameplay, cool environments, not realistic at all, just really fun, really goofy kind of driving, and it's quite a vibe, you know, once you get into it, and it's quite addictive. It does have a countdown timer on the checkpoints, which can be a bit frustrating for newcomers, but once you get into it and you learn how to play, you can really get a good game out of it. Alright, so getting into the RPGs now. So at the top here we've got Dungeon Siege Throne of Agony. This is like a really full-on CRPG game that's got all your typical stats. It's got your strength, your initiative, it's got your intelligence, your agility and stuff. It's got different pickups and power-ups. It's got equipment that you can get. It's got big quests. It's got different enemies. There's an overworld map. You know, it's pretty much like Diablo meets, I guess, Path of Exile. You know, it's those kinds of top-down CRPG ARPGs. And you know, it's just a really polished version of that kind of game. It has also hot swapping co-op, so you can have people just jump in a game and help you if you've got a difficult mission you're doing. And I don't know if I've tested that yet, but I believe you may be able to swap equipment as well somehow between players. So overall, Dungeon Siege is super cool. And for lack of a Diablo title on the system, I'd say this is kind of your therapy for that. Monster Hunter, obviously an extremely popular series. Back at this time, it was a little bit more niche, but it's a fully fleshed out Monster Hunter game. It's got lots of NPCs, lots of quests, lots of monsters, again, lots of equipment and customizations, pretty decent multiplayer and co-op as well, so you can team up with a mate and kind of go through some of those missions. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. Now, I'm personally not an Assassin's Creed fan. I played a bit of the first one, and that was kind of about it. But putting my reservations aside, this is a fairly competent Assassin's Creed game that was designed for the PSP. It does suffer from really poor draw distance, so there's a lot of fog on the map, but it does have all of the classic hallmarks of your Assassin's Creed games. So for that reason, I do have it on here in case I ever feel like revisiting that kind of gameplay. Personally, it's not really for me, but a lot of people do enjoy that title, so it's worth recommending. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. It's basically Final Fantasy, but with Mickey Mouse. As everyone knows kind of by now what Kingdom Hearts is about. This is a slightly stripped down, but still fairly content heavy Kingdom Hearts game, and it does take a very long time to get started. That's one thing I will say, is you kind of have to stick with the game for a few hours for it to start to pick up. Once you do, there's a really good storyline there, really good gameplay and mechanics, and it's well worth having a go. Valkyria Chronicles 2 is sort of like the PlayStation version of Advance Wars. So you've got turn-based combat featuring all these anime style characters. There's a home base where you can add recruits, you can check in with them, you can do training. There's a pretty comprehensive storyline that you follow as you go through with different missions, and it kind of falls into this overarching plot line. So there's a lot of lore and background behind all the different characters. Each type of unit has got different power-ups and abilities and weapons, and you can mix and match your units to make it quite tactical if you want to. You can decide who you want for which mission that was going to suit the environment the best. There's quite a lot of games in the Valkyria Chronicles series. I think this one is the best one for the PSP. It's really sort of keeps to that. The limited controls don't seem to get in the way of being able to enjoy this game. Now, the Godfather Mob Wars, pretty polarizing. I've played the Godfather game, the full version. This is like really stripped down, and it's kind of just bits and pieces of the other Godfather game, and then it's got its own stuff on the side. It's kind of an odd duck. It's like a spin-off, but not really. It's not quite a port, but it's not quite a spin-off. It's somewhere in between. It's a real odd duck of the series, but it is a fun game. It's trying to do a lot, and it doesn't really hit all of the targets, but it is cool if you want to visit the Godfather universe. I guess that's the main thing. I think those films are fantastic, and anything related to that, I'm really into. Now, I think this is the most popular PSP game of all time. So, Vice City Stories. It's Grand Theft Auto. I don't really need to say much more. You guys know exactly what to expect with these kinds of games. So this one is set in Vice City, and then you also have Liberty City Stories. So you've got both of those, which are kind of like spiritual successors to the individual games. So this is like GTA 3. This is like Vice City. Just kind of different for the PSP. Now, I haven't spent a huge amount of time on these games because this might be controversial, but I'm not super keen on Grand Theft Auto. It just never really hit me, but I know that it is such a beloved franchise, so I do have these on here in case inspiration ever strikes, and I can give them a go. Adventures to Go. This is just a really goofy RPG. It does like a not AI, it does like a, what do you call it? The dungeons are sort of generated every time you go into them. Procedurally generated, that's it. So it's procedurally generated dungeons. Really fast paced. Once you get into it, you can just kind of pick up, do a little dungeon and that kind of thing. Now, Claudon, I haven't played much of this one, but it's another, as far as I know, it is like another action RPG, a JRPG. It's supposed to be very good, but I need to give it a little bit more of a go before I can say anything about it. Untold Legends. Now, this is a really interesting one. I like this game because it's so janky, but if you're going to play a Western RPG, a CRPG, I would play Dungeon Siege, and I wouldn't bother with Untold Legends. And if you like Untold Legends, you need to be playing Dungeon Siege. That's kind of all I'll say about that. This is just sort of the odd I guess, an odd relative of that kind of game, but it's just nowhere near as polished, and it just doesn't really work. It's very, very basic. You'll see the UI, it's kind of pretending to have more depth than it has, but you can tell from the UI that a lot of the stuff is very scripted, versus Dungeon Siege actually does have, you know, random loot drops, and it's got different power-ups and pickups and different kind of things, different effects, different weapons, and this is kind of just like, you got new sword, you know, it's like really simple. So still fun, still a cool game in its own right, but just nowhere near the amount of depth that you get from Dungeon Siege. Alright, and then after that we've also got Blade Dancer, another RPG, which personally I haven't really had the time to play, but I've heard good things, so it's on here for me to check out. Zenonia, another classic action RPG. Clydon, again, for some reason, I think maybe one of these is Japanese, one of these is English. I'm not too sure why I've got that game twice in there, but there you go. Radiant Mythology, another RPG. And then this one is really interesting. So ZHP, all I can say is give it a go. It's super weird. It's got a really wacky story. It's kind of like your Unlikely Hero anime style, where he's rising up against all odds to try and defeat the bad guy, and it doesn't go well. And he has to kind of reclaim his powers and save the world again. It's quite fun, just really something really different. Now shooters, this is my personal favorite game on the system. I think Peace Walker is just incredible. This is when obviously you had Kojima doing all of his Metal Gear magic. Just a really amazing story following Big Boss, and you know, just so much depth, so many different ways you can play. Really great multiplayer, really great campaign, endless hours of fun. I think Peace Walker is just fantastic, and if anything, I would rather be playing Peace Walker than, you know, Metal Gear Solid Delta that's coming out, which I think is a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3. But you know, I think Peace Walker needs a redo. Medal of Honor Heroes, my personal favorite of the Medal of Honor Heroes is the first one. The campaign is a little bit kind of more straightforward to get through, and then the multiplayer as well is kind of the main selling point for Heroes. There's skirmishes against bots, you can play ad hoc, you used to be able to play online as well, and back in the day I used to call my mate on the phone, we'd get onto our internet connection, we'd hang up, we'd go into the dial-up, we'd connect our PSPs, we'd play online, and then when one of us disconnected, we'd stop the game, pick up the phone and talk to each other again. So this is very old school gaming, but for us at the time, just being able to play online like that was just a really cool experience. Heroes 2 has got a better campaign. I don't like the UI as much. I think it's a little bit clunkier. The enemy AI is very much more scripted, whereas in Heroes you can have a bit more adaptability on how you complete the missions, but there is a lot more depth to the campaign. So they sacrifice the multiplayer to focus more on the campaign, so it depends on what you want out of the franchise. They're essentially the same game, but it's kind of like multiplayer with campaign light, and then campaign heavy with no multiplayer. Call of Duty, this is just a Call of Duty game back when they were good. This is very early Call of Duty, like Call of Duty 2 style, so World War II, pretty accurate weapons and that kind of thing, but then just turned up to like Hollywood ridiculous, so kind of cool, but historically inaccurate and not really my cup of tea, to be honest, but still a bit of fun. This is an extremely, so SOCOM Fighting Bravo is the best SOCOM game on the system. It's extremely tactical. You've got a squad of characters you can order around and do different objectives. You can subdue enemies, you can arrest them, you can interrogate them, you can explore for more intel. You know, it's like full Spec Ops kind of stuff. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I think this game was also developed with the US Army or the US Navy supporting them. So a lot of it is very accurate and detailed. So if you're really into military stuff and you like playing airsoft or you're into milsim, this is definitely a good game to try out. Siphon Filter, so this is kind of like what if James Bond was actually good. So this is like, you've got all your gadgets, you've got different ways you can interact with the environment, you've got different scopes, different vision modes that you can use to identify things in the environment. You've got different methods of takedowns. You can go full stealth or guns blazing. There's different attachments for weapons, different weapon types. It's a bit more of an intellectual game, but it's not quite as painful as, you know, when you're playing those kinds of games where you really have to be full stealth all the time. In Dark Mirror, it doesn't matter if you go guns blazing, you can still finish the mission most of the time. You know, it's just different ways in which you want to handle the situations. Third Birthday, this is like an action shooter with an end of the world apocalypse style scenario. It's Square Enix, so you can imagine that the storyline is pretty bonkers. It's pretty out there, but yeah, it's kind of, I believe this is in the Parasite Eve series, or in that continuity. But really cool. You basically, like, they use time travel to go back in time to try and save the world by inhabiting the bodies of soldiers and then ordering them around. So it's really kind of surreal and cerebral action RPG kind of fighting shooter game. So Gun is basically Red Dead Redemption if it was a PSP game. I mean, that's kind of really it. I think that sums it up the best. The controls are pretty awful, but the rest of the game is pretty fun, and in terms of like a gunslinging game on the go, this is really your only option. And if you're patient and you get used to it, there is a lot of fun to be had here. But for me personally, I just could never really get over the over-the-shoulder aiming and the kind of jank of the game. But it is supposed to be, you know, one of the better options for westerns on here. Battlefront 2 needs no introduction. Still, in my opinion, the best Star Wars game they ever made. Just absolutely incredible game, and the PSP version retains most of that functionality. Obviously, there's a bit of sacrifice to the maps and that kind of thing, but it is pretty faithful. There's a lot of stuff you can do there, and if you just want to do Galactic Conquest or Instant Action, it's absolutely all there for you. Renegade Squadron is a little bit different. It's like an over-the-shoulder PSP-made game, super underrated. It's a really, really good game. It is quite different to the classic Battlefront. Like, you have more of a class system, so you've got a certain amount of points you can spend on equipment to create your own character rather than choosing from a standardized unit, but it does still achieve very similar kind of things. Resistance Retribution. Now, this was back when Resistance was the big franchise. You know, at the time it was kind of like not quite a rival to Halo, but it was in that kind of same line of thought. It was a hero shooter. It had really interesting weapons. It had aliens, but this was very much, you know, limited by the PSP in scope. But the lore and the character design was all very much, you could instantly recognize it as the Resistance games. Pretty cool game overall, and it retains a lot of the functionality from the PS3 versions of the games. And I really do think it's quite a good one. Once you get used to the controls, again, as pretty much with all of these games, to be fair, once you can get over the limitations of the controls, these games are really fun. Killzone Liberation is probably the second best Killzone game in the series. Even though it's top down and it's kind of a bit of a departure, it's really well polished. Like, the environments are really detailed, the gameplay is great, there's a lot of incidental storytelling with the way the environments are all placed and different things you can discover. The weapon progression kind of feels natural as well. Like, you unlock different weapons as you go through the game and meet tougher enemies. Like, you might meet an enemy for the first time that's got an Uzi, and then in the next mission you might find that Uzi and you can use it against other enemies. So, like, it slowly introduces different mechanics as you go through. It does have like a co-op buddy system as well, and there's NPCs you can interact with, different objectives, there's credits you can get to unlock and get different gear. And then the multiplayer as well is really well fleshed out. It's very much an arcade style, but the multiplayer deathmatch modes are really fun, so it's a really, really good game. There is also a chapter 5 that you can unlock for this game. Once you finish the campaign, if you have the DLC installed, there's an extra additional chapter as well. So the campaign in this game is really, really good, and I highly recommend this game. This is another version of Battlefront 2 that I've covered. It's probably one of my more successful videos. This is the remastered edition, which has got all those extra features, the console hacks, the different commands, the more units, the extra maps, all that kind of cool stuff. So I've already covered this video, so I'm not going to go over that anymore, but that is on there as well. Now, into strategy, D&D Tactics. So this is kind of like your top-down Final Fantasy turn-based tactics game, but it's using Dungeons and Dragons lore and mechanics. Then you've got, then you've got Final Fantasy Tactics, which is the same as the above, but the more original of the models. I think this is set in, is it Ivalice or Ivalice, which is the Tactics universe. I used to play Tactics on the GBA. This is kind of like a very similar game to that. The mechanics are all the same, the class systems are all the same. Just generally a really, really good Final Fantasy game if you like turn-based, team-based RPGs. And then Warhammer 40k Squad Command. So with Squad Command, it pretty much just plays like Warhammer. So you've got your squad, you move them around for a turn. There's Fog of War, you've got line of sight, there's accuracy, there's different forms of cover, there's different unit types, there's different AP that you get to spend every turn. So it's pretty much just playing Warhammer as Space Marines. And it's pretty in-depth, and the mechanics are really good. Now we get into some real funky games here, some Japanese exclusives. Most of these are English translated. So you've got Final Fantasy Type 0, which is just an incredible game. It came out on 2 UMDs when it was released because it was just so big. I've got the remaster on PS4 as well that I play, and the storyline is incredible, the mechanics are really unique, just a really fun game, and I'm surprised that more people don't know about this Final Fantasy game because it's up there. I'd say this is probably my top 5 Final Fantasies of all time. Then you've got the Persona series. I won't spend a lot of time on these because it's way too hard to explain. But if you've played Persona 5 or 4, then you probably know. Persona 3 Portable is the classic one. This is the undubbed fan version, so it's the English game with the Japanese audio. Really, really good. Valkyria Chronicles, so this is kind of like Valkyria Chronicles 2, but this is the 3rd game in the series, which was only released in Japan. And then the final mix version of Kingdom Hearts. Again, this is Japan only with extra content. And Project Diva, Hatsune Miku at her finest on the console. So a lot of songs, rhythm games, dancing and stuff. You can get new outfits for her. You can change different Vocaloids as well. You can do... It's just a Hatsune Miku game. I mean, it's a Miku game. So you can do all the Miku stuff. Pretty fun though. Pretty cool. I'm terrible at it, but it's good fun. I honestly have no idea what this game is. Looks interesting. I don't think I've ever played this one. And that does happen, you know, when you've got so many games on the console. It's not every day that you can play everything. So there are some here that I haven't tried yet. So I'm not actually sure what that game is. Spiral Chaos? Anyway. Phantasy Star Portable, another classic RPG game. Suikoden, Jeanne d'Arc, Steins Gate, and whatever this is. So yeah, these games I haven't played as much. I've played the Persona ones and Final Fantasy. I've played Hatsune Miku, of course. I played a little bit of Phantasy Star and Jeanne d'Arc, but I haven't played Steins Gate or whatever this is, so if you guys can let me know what this game is, that would be pretty cool, because I don't actually know. Alright, so now we're going to go into the PS1 ports. These are my personal favourites. They're kind of very mainstream, but this is all the bangers really. So we've got Klonoa, my personal favourite 2.5D platformer of all time. It is just an incredible game. Really ripping storyline, cool art style, great gameplay mechanics, level designs are immaculate. I've played the remaster of this, which is not as good as the original. I think the original graphics and the original gameplay, 100% is the best way to play it. Just an incredible game, no notes at all. Fantastic. Of course you've got Crash Bandicoot, Cash Banuka, back at it again, Crash 2, and Crash 3, and of course CTR. So all the first 4 Naughty Dog Crash Bandicoot games. I'm a bit of a Gen 1er, so as far as I'm concerned, after these 4 games, Crash Bandicoot died and was replaced by an imposter. I really wish they'd bring the series a bit more back to this, and we did with Crash Bandicoot 4. but it was kind of too little too late. I still think these are the only Crash Bandicoot games that are worth playing, but I know Twinsanity is quite popular and there's quite a few others, so this is just obviously this is my personal opinion, which doesn't really mean much, but yeah, I've got all the Crash games there. Then we've also got A Bug's Life, which is for a movie tie-in, is a really, really well put together game. It's got different seeds you can use, which will create different plants, which you can use to interact with the environment, different types of berries that you can use that have different weapon attack powers and different power levels and different functions, different maps and worlds and different kinds of places you can explore. It follows the storyline of the movie with different clips you can unlock, which back in the day was like a really cool way to revisit some fun moments from the movie. You know, DVDs and streaming and that stuff wasn't available when this game came out, so it was quite a fun way to revisit some of those moments. And then very similar is your Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. This game went way too hard. You know, it really didn't need to be this good, but it was a fantastic game. Different types of moves that Buzz could do with his wings or with his laser, double jumping around, platforming. The environments were all based appropriately to scale. So like one level was Andy's house, one level was just the neighborhood downtown, one level was the airport carousel, one level was Pizza Planet, and one level was Al's Toy Barn. So just really cool, just really awesome attention to detail, accuracy of scale, cool tie-ins with all the different toys and the different characters from the franchise. Really, really fun. Lots of replayability as well, because there were unlockable abilities, so you could go back to a level once you'd unlocked that ability to access different areas and get more Pizza Planet tokens, which you could then use. You know, once you collect those tokens, I believe that would unlock the cinematics. There may have been other mechanics there as well, but yeah, that is just a fantastic game. These two are probably like the top movie tie-in games on the PS1. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. I don't really need to explain this. Fantastic skateboarding game. Still one of the best ones they've ever made. And I personally think Gran Turismo 1 is still one of the best racing sim games. It's got just enough of that old school charm, but the driving physics are still pretty accurate. And I think the level of customization that you actually have in this game is something that we lost over time. Like in GT1, you can really go in and you can dial all your different things around and really customize your cars however you like. The upgrades are surprisingly deep for a game that looks like, you know, very potato mode by today's standards. But if you get over the graphics, the gameplay is actually really incredible. Same thing with Gran Turismo 2. This is slightly more arcade feeling than Gran Turismo 1, and I don't know if it's just because they tried to polish it or put more content in, which means they had to bring the pixel count down, or something that changed between the two games, but I felt like they had more time to really perfect Gran Turismo 1, and then Gran Turismo 2 was kind of just trying to capture that sequel bait, and now obviously we're on to Gran Turismo 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is. Now V-Rally 2 is called something different in Europe, but it's called Need for Speed V-Rally, I think just for brand likeness or like relatability in the American market. But essentially this is just a really well put together game. I would rate V-Rally above Sega Rally. Even though the graphics are not as good, the gameplay is better. It also has a level editor, which me and my friends used to make levels which were just successive hills, massive hills going up and down, and we just go full throttle and do big flips and shit like that. So really, really fun game. Cool unlockables. As you progress through the main championship, you can get different cars and unlock different things like that. Quake 2. This is Quake 2. Classic shooter, really well ported onto the PS1 and therefore very playable on the PSP. Some limitations in terms of, you know, the frame rates that you're going to get out of this game versus your traditional Quake, which runs really high frames. This does feel like it's been put through a processor first, but it is pretty faithful. You know, it's Quake 2, so you know, what more could you ask for? It's pretty damn good. Now, LSD Dream Emulator is the most interesting game I've ever played. It's absolutely bonkers. If you are the kind of people that are inclined to partake of certain substances, I'd highly recommend that you do this while doing that, because it is just completely bonkers. Pretty much anything in the environment that you interact with is going to take you somewhere else. So for example, like if you're walking around a field and you decide to walk up to a statue, if you touch that statue, it'll take you to a different place, which has got, you know, a giant tower where there's a flower man, and you talk to the flower man and he takes you to a different place again, which is a room full of other rooms. And then if you go into there and you just touch a wall by mistake, it'll take you somewhere else. Like, everything is interactable in the game, but nothing really makes sense, and you have to try and figure out how to navigate this place. And based on what you do, there's like an overmap, and every time you go through a stage, it'll show you your progress on the map, and it'll like plot your trip. Just really bonkers. Super cool game. It does take a bit of patience, and you have to understand it's kind of like just a surreal walking experiment art game. So that's not like a game, it's just like an art piece, interactive art piece. But my god, is it fun. It's so crazy, it's so weird. Mr. Domino is one of those classic games where if you make a mistake, you have to start again. It's very unforgiving, but once you get into the rhythm of it, it's quite fun. Mr. Domino runs around the board, and you have to like jump, hop, and skip, and go through different obstacles and things. It's really satisfying when you pull it off, but it can be a bit frustrating to get into. And then Incredible Crisis, which is, you know, it has an amazing soundtrack, which is like a live ska band, a live Japanese ska band that plays the music for each of the scenarios. And then you have like a series of quick time events that you have to compete in various high stress situations as an office worker that has to you know, run away from a concrete pipe that's chasing you, or jump over puddles or rescue a dog, or stop and jump in an elevator just before it hits the ground, or just really wacky scenarios where you're just a normal guy trying to get through the day, and then the whole world is just falling apart around you. It's really fun, really cool game. And then you've got one of the demo discs that I did on my first demo compilation. So this one is demo disc 42, which has got some really cool features on it. It's got Metal Gear Solid. It's also got a Net Eurose compilation. So that is a whole bunch of fan-made games back in the day that had their Net Eurose dev kits, and they would submit that to PlayStation Magazine, and they would get put here. So there's quite a few good Eurose games on here, like Blitter Boy, for example. Now, the fabled PSP Minis, which are kind of like the apps of the day. Zenonia is there again. These are pen and paper style RPGs. So it's like those Goosebumps choose your own adventure games, but they're interactive with the book. So you'll go through and it'll be like, oh, you find a goblin. Do you go down the corridor, or do you turn back around? So it's kind of those kinds of choose your own adventure games. Really interesting concept though. Nova, this is the infamous Halo clone or Halo ripoff that was put onto pretty much every platform. It's very, very obviously a Halo ripoff, but it's still pretty fun. Like, honestly, it's actually not bad. Where Is My Heart is a surprisingly complex platformer where you have little characters and the screens are segmented in such a way that it's not always obvious the best path forwards to start with. You have to really think about how each of the tiles are interacting and how you're going to get through the level. Who's That Flying? Legend of Robot. Pac-Man. Let's Golf. One Epic Game. 1000 Tiny Claws. Zombie Tycoon. Widget's Odyssey. War of Sonria. Shift Extended. Wizorb. Brainpipe. Carnivore's Dinosaur Hunter. And Flow. So all of these, I mean, they're not quite shovelware. They are quite unique in their design. There were a hell of a lot of these minis. I've actually got a memory card somewhere that's only got minis on it. And when I'm feeling like beating myself up, I will force myself to only play minis for a couple of weeks and then report back. But some of these are absolute garbage, and these are just kind of some of the ones that are bearable that I've put on here. A couple of them are quite fun. Like, I do like these little choose your own adventure ones, but the rest of them I could probably do without. Maybe Where Is My Heart is an exception to that. That's quite a fun game, but the rest of these are kind of so-so. Now Flow is cool. It's not really a game, but it's just a really fun, relaxing simulator, environmental kind of thing. We have petals and flowers and stuff, so it's just quite fun to play. Something a bit different. Emulators. Now I'm not going to get into too much detail here because these kind of deserve their own video, but just quickly, I've got a GBA, a Game Boy Color, Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, Pokemon Mini, and a Scum VM. So I've got all those emulators on here. For homebrew, we've got our Minecraft 1.3, we've got Cave Story, we've got original classic Doom, we've got Halo, kind of. It's like Counter-Strike Halo. It's a bit of a weird one. I think it's a Quake reskin. And Flappy Bird. And then we're down into the system files. So just a module checker, Wi-Fi hacker, you've got your homebrew sorter and fast recovery and update if you need those. And that is, honestly, that is pretty much it. And to be fair, I spend most of my time just playing the few games. I play a fair bit of Dungeon Siege, I play a lot of Star Wars, I play a few racing games, and then that's kind of it, really. The rest of the time, to be fair, I spend more time playing PS5 these days, but, you know, the joy I get out of messing with PSPs is I probably have more fun setting them up than I do have actually playing the games. I guess is kind of the honest take, but out of all of these, you know, there are definitely, I'd say all of these games, any of these games is absolutely worth your time. If you want me to cover any of these in more depth, please let me know in the comments. I'd be really keen to do a deep dive on some of these videos, on some of these games rather, or if there's some titles that you just want to see me do some gameplay for, I can just record an hour or whatever of a game if you want to see what it's like, or if you want me to do some dialogue over the top, or if you want me to do it with no commentary and I can just let the game play, you know, that's also fine. Just whatever you guys really want to do, and I'll respond to that and make the content for you, because that's the whole point, is this is supposed to be a channel for you guys. It's just a way that I can share what I'm interested in with my audience. Obviously you guys are also interested in the same thing, that's why you're here. So if there is anything that you want to see in an upcoming video, please do reach out. I know my upload schedule is pretty sporadic, you know, it might be 5 to 6 months before you see another video, but unless I've got something worthwhile, I'm not just going to put a whole bunch of garbage up there and just saturate the platform. I really am only going to put content up there that's worth everyone's time. So today I thought this was really just a good opportunity to show you that I'm playing my PSP on a big TV in my car. You know, it's just something that I thought was really cool, and maybe you guys might be inspired to do something similar. Obviously in the previous video I also showed you with my Raspberry Pi was connected up there as well. So I'm going to wrap things up, but that's pretty much it. So we've got, you know, we've got our PSP in the car and the TV. That is all working well. So I think for the next time we come back, if I don't hear from anyone and no one wants me to do a deep dive into a particular game, I might go away now and spend some time working on another top 10. I was thinking of doing the top 10 racing games on the platform, because there are a hell of a lot of racing games on the PSP, and most of them are bad. But I think I can probably narrow it down to 10 decent ones and do a video on that. So if you guys are keen to see that, then that's what we'll be doing next. But by all means, if you guys have a better idea, or if you have something that you really want to check out, want me to cover, anything to do with custom firmware, anything to do with different plugins, or any help you need, let me know in the comments. I'm always available for general help. Like you've probably seen, even though I don't upload all the time, I am still very active on my videos and constantly checking comments. If you do have any problems with your PSP, or you want any advice at all, just reach out, let me know what the story is, and I'll be able to get in there and help you. Most of the time I'll know what's going on. I can at least point you in the right direction if that's not the case. There is also heaps of creators out there that have got really good content as well. So if you don't find it on my page, chances are if you go onto the r/PSP subreddit, you can ask people there. There's lots of really good information and advice there. I'm also active in that subreddit, so you probably will come across me at some point anyway. A lot of people ask very similar questions around what battery should I get. I'd say the Ostent high capacity batteries are the better ones. You can get away with Camera and Sino, but stay away from the generic ones. When it comes to memory cards, I would recommend using a proper rated class 10 SD card and using a micro SD to Memory Stick Pro Duo adapter. The adapters are really flimsy, so once you've got the SD card in there, pop it in the PSP and leave it alone. Buy at least a 64 gig or a 128 gig memory card. If you have to, you can buy a 32 gig SD, but just bear in mind that PSP games generally are around a gigabyte, give or take 100 megabytes either side. So, you know, if you've got a 32 gig card, chances are you're probably only going to get about 25, 26 games on there. Whereas if you have, you know, obviously a larger capacity card, this is a 128 gig card, and these are the games I have on there. I also have movies and music and photos in there. So I've got lots of content on this console, and I still have a decent chunk of free space. You may come across the issue if you're using an SD card where the content that you're trying to, for example, you're trying to play a game and it won't recognize because you have so much free space. So all you need to do is put a smaller memory card in, create a save file, move the save file over to your other memory card, and then you can carry on. There's only a small handful of titles that do that, but it can be a bit of an inconvenience. So otherwise, I'm just going to wrap things up for today. Thank you very much for watching. I've been your host, Sam, and I'll see you next time on Everything PSP.